Greetings, fellow frontier explorers. Did you know that in the lawless heart of 1880s Wyoming, a notorious outlaw met a fate so macabre it blurred the line between justice and horror, turning his own body into a governor's prized footwear? Picture this: the creak of a hangman's noose under a starlit Wyoming sky, the chill of a surgeon's scalpel in a dimly lit office, and the audacious strut of a politician dancing in shoes crafted from human skin. These are the echoes of Big Nose George's saga, a tale of robbery, revenge, and the raw edge of the American West that will leave you questioning the very soul of frontier vengeance. Today, we're riding deep into this forgotten epic, unearthing every twist from his desperate crimes to his bizarre immortality, backed by dusty ledgers and eyewitness whispers that bring the Old West alive. If you're hooked on these untamed tales of outlaws and oddities, smash that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join our posse for more hidden history that hits harder than a six-shooter. Let's kick off our journey not in the sagebrush Badlands, but across the Atlantic, where our story's anti-hero first drew breath. George Francis Parrott, better known to the world as Big Nose George for that unmistakable proboscis that dominated his scarred face, was born on March 20th, 1834, in the rolling hills of Montbéliard, France. A place of clockmakers and quiet vineyards, it was worlds away from the powder keg chaos awaiting him. But young George wasn't one for tidy European rhythms. Whispers from old Iowa farm records suggest he fled the old world as a teen, chasing the siren call of America's endless horizons, landing penniless on New York's shores around 1850. By his early 20s, Parrott had drifted westward, like so many dreamers turned drifters, scratching out a living as a laborer in the Montana goldfields, only to find fool's gold in honest toil. The lure of quick riches pulled him into the shadows. By the mid-1860s, he was rustling cattle along the Powder River, his gang, a ragtag crew of hard-luck souls. Dutch Charlie Burris, a hulking German immigrant with a temper like a stampede, and a rotating cast of ne'er-do-wells who called themselves the Parrott Gang. They hit stagecoaches near the Fort Laramie, pocketing payrolls from nervous bankers who handed over sacks without a fight. Imagine George, his big nose twitching under a wide-brimmed hat, barking orders in the moonless night. "Load up, boys. Freedom's just a gallop away." But rustling was small potatoes. George's ambitions burned hotter, fueled by tales of train heists that could make a man rich overnight. It was the summer of 1878 when those ambitions ignited into infamy. On a lonely stretch of Union Pacific track, hugging the Medicine Bow River, the gang, 5 strong now, had graduated to grand larceny, dynamite under the rails. Masks pulled low, hearts pounding with the promise of gold shipments bound for Denver. But as the 4:20 p.m. express rattled by on August 19th, nothing happened. No blast, no derailment, just the mocking chug of iron wheels fading into the dusk. The botch was catastrophic. Powder fizzled wet from a sudden rain, leaving the outlaws cursing in the mud. Worse, word spread fast in that telegraph-wired territory. Union Pacific wasn't forgiving train tamperers. Enter the lawmen, Deputy Sheriff Robert Bob Widowfield, a sturdy Carbon County veteran with a mustache like a broom and eyes sharp as barbed wire, and Tip Vincent, a slick Pinkerton detective from the railroad's payroll, both dispatched to hunt the saboteurs. They pitched camp in Rattlesnake Canyon near Elk Mountain, a jagged scar in the earth where echoes played tricks on the wind. What they didn't know was that George's scouts had flipped the script on that fateful evening. The gang ambushed the camp at dusk. Gunfire cracked like thunder. Widowfield took a bullet to the face, crumpling without a whisper, his blood soaking the sage. Vincent bolted on horseback, but a second shot from George's rifle felled him mid-stride, his body tumbling into the canyon's embrace. The outlaws stripped their weapons, a fine Winchester repeater and a pearl-handled Colt, and one horse, then dragged the corpses into a shallow grave, covering them with rocks and lies. Word of the double murder hit Rawlins like a prairie fire, igniting outrage from homesteaders to tycoons. Union Pacific slapped a $10,000 bounty on the killers' heads, equivalent to a rancher's lifetime wage, soon doubled to $20,000 by Governor John Wesley Hoyt, who vowed to stamp out this viper's nest. Posters fluttered from every saloon post, wanted for the heinous murder of officers Widowfield and Vincent, George Big Nose Parrott and accomplices, dead or alive. George, ever the braggart, laughed it off in hidden camps, but the heat was on. Posses scoured the Black Hills, and even old Comanche scouts whispered of the big-nosed devil evading nooses. Yet George didn't lay low. He escalated, leading a brazen daylight robbery in February 1879 near Miles City, Montana. The target, Merchant Morris Can, a Jewish trader hauling $14,000 in gold dust from Fort Keogh's paymaster convoy, guarded by soldiers, no less. George's gang, masks of flour sacks over their faces, waited in Can's coulee, a steep ravine 10 miles east of the Powder River crossing. As the wagons creaked into view, rifles barked. The lead and rear guards surrendered without a shot, soldiers dropping arms at the sight of leveled Winchesters. Can, bound and gagged, watched helplessly as saddlebags were rifled. $3,600 to $14,000 vanished into bandanas, depending on whose ledger you trust. Dutch Charlie cracked a whip over the team's backs, herding them like cattle as the outlaws melted into the bluffs. It was a masterstroke, but hubris's seed was sown. George, flush with coin, couldn't resist the bottle. Fast forward to late 1880 in Milestown's rowdy saloons, now Miles City, Montana's Sin Strip, where George and Charlie drowned their spoils in rotgut whiskey. Ears perked by a local gambler, deputies Lemuel Lem Wilson and Fred Schmelzel overheard the pair boasting. "We plugged those Wyoming badges clean. Widowfield's brains painted the dirt." The lawmen played coy, buying rounds until the outlaws staggered, then clapped irons on them in a back alley brawl. George, his nose bloodied and pride shattered, was hauled south to Rawlins in a guarded coach. The $20,000 bounty now cashed in whispers of promotion for the deputies. Charlie followed soon after, snarling curses that echoed off the prison walls. Justice, it seemed, had lassoed the untouchable, but was George broken? Hardly. In the dim cells of Carbon County Jail, under the watchful eye of jailer Robert Rankin, a family man with a kind face, hardened by frontier grit, George plotted. Trial came swift in early 1881. Before Judge Jacob Blair, he pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, his voice steady as he recounted the canyon ambush. "I fired, true, Your Honor, no regrets for badges in my way," he allegedly drawled, per courtroom sketches in the Rawlins Daily Republican. Sentence: hanged by the neck until dead on April 2nd, 1881, from a scaffold in the town square. The gallows loomed, but George's mind raced like a Mustang. Freedom or infamy, he'd take either over a rope. Nights blurred into feverish scheming, armed only with a smuggled pocket knife, its blade nicked from years of whittling steaks, and a jagged chunk of sandstone pried from the cell floor. George filed at his shackles, rivets. Sparks flew in secret, the metallic rasp masked by his humming of Sweet Betsy from Pike. By March 22nd, the irons loosened just enough. Dawn broke cold as he slipped into the jail's washroom, heart hammering. Rankin, making rounds with coffee, never saw the blow coming. George swung the heavy chains like a flail, cracking the jailer's skull with a sickening thud. Blood pooled on the flagstones. Rankin groaned, clutching his head as George rifled 4 keys. But fate's cruel jape, the commotion roused Rosa Rankin, the jailer's iron-willed wife, who snatched her husband's revolver from its holster. Rosa's 3 shots rang out, not at George, but skyward, a frontier SOS that pierced the morning fog like Judgment Day. Help, the devil's loose. Her voice cracked over the rooftops, summoning the town from beds and breakfasts. Within minutes, a mob swelled, over 200 strong. Ranchers in chaps, merchants with shotguns, even the town blacksmith swinging a hammer. They stormed the jail, masked vigilantes shoving Rosa aside, keys jangling as they dragged a defiant George into the street. "String him up, now," roared the crowd, their fury a living beast born of Widowfield's widow's tears and Vincent's orphaned kids. No trial, no mercy. Just a telegraph pole on the Wyoming Central line, its crossarm groaning under the noose. George kicked and cursed, his big nose purpled, until a snap silenced him forever at 8:17 a.m. Word spread like wildfire. Dutch Charlie en route from Montana learned his fate mid-train. Spotted cowering in a baggage car upon arrival, he too faced the mob's rope. Hanged from the same pole's beam that afternoon, his body swaying beside his leaders like grim wind chimes. Rawlins exhaled, but the real horror, it dangled not from the gallows, but in the shadows of science's twisted curiosity. No kin claimed George's corpse, no French whispers from Montbeliard. So it fell to 2 local doctors, John Osborne, an ambitious surgeon with eyes on politics, and Thomas McGee, a phrenologist, chasing criminal brains like alchemists sought gold. In McGee's office, lamplight flickering on steel tools, they dissected the body that very night, driven by the era's pseudoscience. Could bumps on a skull explain a man's evil? Osborne's scalpel danced first, sawing off the skullcap with a whir that echoed like a death rattle, exposing the brain's gray folds for probing. "Here, the seat of savagery," McGee muttered, sketching lobes as if mapping hell, but the real macabre masterpiece. Osborne flayed skin from George's thighs and chest, nipples and all, pickling it in a brine of whiskey and salt, then shipping it to a Denver tanner named Macabre. Weeks later, returned a pair of sleek boots, supple as kid leather, and a doctor's satchel etched with Osborne's initials. George, the horse thief, had become footwear. Meanwhile, young Lillian Heath Nelson, just 16, a wide-eyed medical apprentice with dreams bigger than the Tetons, received the skullcap as a study aid. She tucked pipes in its curve, stubbed cigars on its dome, even propped doors with it for decades, giggling at guests' gasps. Lillian's story, pure Wyoming grit. Born in 1864 to a frontier family, she devoured anatomy texts by candlelight, apprenticing under McGee while most girls her age mended socks. That skullcap wasn't trophy, it was talisman. She carried it to med school in Cincinnati, earning her MD in 1893 as the Equality State's first female physician. It reminded me she'd later confide in a 1940s interview archived at the Wyoming State Historical Society that even monsters pave paths for the living. Osborne, meanwhile, stashed the body in a whiskey barrel, brined like corned beef, behind McGee's office. A macabre root cellar until shallow burial in '82, the boots. Osborne polished them religiously, strutting in them to his 1892 inaugural ball as Wyoming's third governor, the first Democrat to boot, dancing a triumphant waltz while whispers rippled, "Feel that underfoot. That's justice, tanned and tailored." But relics have a way of resurfacing like ghosts, too stubborn for the grave. Fast forward to May 11th, 1950, Rawlins construction crews, grading a parking lot behind the old McGee site, unearthed a rusted whiskey keg, splintered staves, spilling yellowed bones, a sawed-off cranium, and a dusty vial of vegetable compound for preservation. The foreman paled. "Lord, it's him, the nose." Newspapers erupted. The Beatrice Daily Sun splashed "Big Nose rises again." Skeptics demanded proof, but enter Lillian, now 86 and spry as ever, clutching her ashtray relic. It fit the skull like a crown, seamless, undeniable. Modern forensics sealed it. DNA from the bones matched traces in the cap, per a 2010 University of Wyoming study. The lower jaw, earless death mask, cast in plaster that very lynchy night. And those infamous shoes found a home at the Carbon County Museum in Rawlins, where they draw 10,000 pilgrims yearly, staring slack-jawed at history's hide. The shackles that felled Rankin, shipped to Omaha's Union Pacific Museum, rusted links beside photos of the canyon graves. Charlie's noose, lost to time, like the satchel, rumored pawned in a Denver dive, its whereabouts a tantalizing void. And George's myths, oh, they bloomed wilder than buffalo grass. In a boastful 1880 pretrial chinwag, printed in the Carbon County Journal, he claimed ties to Jesse James, his henchman Frank McKinney, a dead ringer for the Missouri Bandit, and even Butch Cassidy's shadow. So, as the telegraph pole creaks empty in our mind's eye, and those shoes gleam under museum glass, what lingers from Big Nose George's grisly end? Frontier justice, raw and retributive, reminds us how mobs birthed states. Wyoming's 1890 Constitution, born from such vigilante fires, curbing lynchings, chaos. Yet it whispers darker, Osborne's phrenology. That quack quest for criminal genes echoes eugenics' shadows, a pseudoscience that scarred souls till the 20th century's light. And Lillian, her saga spotlights unsung heroines, the women who stitched the West's wounds while men played outlaw. What if George had slipped those rivets clean away? Would trains run safer? Or would another nose rise in his shadow? Ponder that over your next campfire brew, friends. History's not dusty tomes, but choices that skin us all. If this ride through Rawlins ropes and relics stirred your inner historian, drop a comment. Would you dan those boots for a ballot, or is frontier fate too fierce? Like, share with your posse, and subscribe for more deep dives into the West's wild whispers. Thanks for exploring with me. Until the next trail dust settles, keep questioning the past. Ride safe.